like that.
And Glover says being underfunded has put the college in a position of not being able to build its endowment. In Nashville, I'm Damon Mitchell for Marketplace.
Now to this era of digital certificates of authenticity. These non-fungible tokens, NFTs, allow someone to sell a digital thing as a quote-unquote original. The news is the movie studio Miramax is suing director Quentin Tarantino, who's planning to auction off several tokens he's making connected to his 1994 hit Pulp Fiction, things like a scan of handwritten script pages. The movie studio says it has the rights, not Mr. Tarantino. And a loose-knit online group formed only last week has been furiously encouraging its members to pool some of their cryptocurrency holdings in a bid to buy one of the copies of the U.S. Constitution. As of last evening, Constitution DAO has raised nearly $30 million of the digital currency Ethereum. That's way over what you'd expect to need to buy the document at the Sotheby's auction tonight. I'm David Brancaccio with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
Wayne Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Law Firm.
I'm Wayne Hogan. The Move Over Law protects police, fire, EMS, utility, and sanitation personnel by requiring drivers to move over and slow down for their vehicles.
Learn more at waynehogan.law.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect with Melissa Ross. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
Just 1% of drivers in Jacksonville is on the road in an electric vehicle. I'm Melissa Ross, and just ahead this hour on First Coast Connect, what the coming EV revolution means for our roads, our garages, our lives. A look inside a special Adapt Florida investigation. That's coming up, then later.
We've got 2 to 8% of the workforce that's showing hesitation about vaccine mandates and whether they want to comply with that expectation. So it really has changed the workplace dynamic.
The Big Quit, why so many American workers are leaving their jobs. Plus, Rethreaded gets bold new digs. All of that and more just ahead. After the day's news.
Live from NPR News, I'm Nora Rahm. The leaders of Canada and Mexico are due at the White House this afternoon for talks with President Biden. It's the first such summit in 5 years. The issues are expected to include COVID-19 vaccinations and efforts to combat global warming. As Dan Karpenchuk reports, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has his own list of priorities.
At the top of that list is the Biden administration's proposed tax credits for electric vehicles, which could cut Canadian-made vehicles and parts out of an incentive program for U.S. buyers. Other issues could include Washington's doubling of tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber and a strict Buy America policy, as well as trade disputes against Canada's agriculture sector.
Dan Karpenchuk reporting. The House of Representatives has censured member Paul Gosar and stripped him of his committee assignments. The Arizona Republican had posted an anime video depicting killing Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She urged the censor resolution be adopted to show that human dignity matters.
What is so hard? What is so hard about saying that this is wrong? This is not about me. This is not about Representative Gosar. But this is about what we are willing to accept.
Republican leader Kevin McCarthy said the resolution was brought for political reasons.
Let me be clear. I do not condone violence, and Representative Gosar had echoed that sentiment. The video was deleted, but Democrats won't listen because they will do anything to distract from the failures of one-party rule in 1 year, destroying a nation.
After the censure vote, Gosar retweeted the video. Experts on military suicide testified yesterday in Congress. NPR's Quill Lawrence reports the Pentagon's internal watchdog found the U.S. military is not screening departing troops for suicide risk.
The Pentagon Inspector General found that the Department of Defense is not following its own policy, failing to screen troops for suicide risk as they leave the service, and not providing uninterrupted mental health care. Retired Army General Jack Hammond testified that the rate is highest among younger troops and veterans.
I don't know a veteran of Iraq or Afghanistan that doesn't personally know someone who's taken their life, and usually it's 2 or 3.
Risk of suicide spikes as troops transition to civilian life. According to the Inspector General, the Pentagon has failed to provide a warm handoff to VA or other civilian mental health care. Quill Lawrence, NPR News.
The Labor Department reported this morning that the number of people filing new unemployment claims fell by 1,000 last week to 268,000, the lowest level since March of last year. This is NPR News.
And the time is now 4 minutes after 9. This is WJCT News 89.9. A new redistricting plan by Georgia Republican lawmakers would push Democratic Representative Lucy McBath into a strongly Republican 6th congressional district. McBath was elected to represent the Metro Atlanta district in 2018, 6 years after her teenage son Jordan Davis was shot to death in a convenience store parking lot on Jacksonville's east side. The Georgia district had previously been a Republican Party stronghold and home to the likes of former House Speaker Newt Gingrich and Senator Johnny Isakson. The number of dead Florida manatees this year has risen to more than 1,000. Robbie Gaffney reports congressional lawmakers are hoping to bypass current regulations to get the mammal relisted as endangered.
The state's Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission says most of the manatees starved to death last winter when they went to warm water spots with little food. That food was lost due to nutrient pollution, which caused algal blooms that clouded sunlight, killing the plant life manatees depend on. As another winter looms ahead, conservationists fear another massive die-off will happen. Florida congressional lawmakers are hoping that by uplisting the West Indian manatee, Florida's manatee, to endangered, more protections for the mammal will be put in place. I'm Robbie Gaffney.
It's now 66 degrees here in downtown Jacksonville. We have an overcast sky, near 79 for this afternoon's high temperature, 20% chance of rain this afternoon.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Klaviyo, working to help brands deliver personalized email and SMS campaigns that drive revenue and create genuine customer relationships at klaviyo.com/NPR.
Fewer fumes. We'll tell you what the switch to electric vehicles is going to mean for the 904. Good morning. We're live from Studio 5. I'm Melissa Ross, and this is First Coast Connect. Thanks for listening. Just ahead this hour, Florida is getting lots more charging stations for electric vehicles, even though only 1% of us is driving one, at least today. But your life on the road is going to change, and we're taking a closer look at how. Give us a call, everybody, 549-2937. Then later, the big quit, why millions of workers are walking off the job. All of that and more just ahead. But first this morning, let's go back to the height of the COVID pandemic and the economic slowdown. This city, like so many others, virtually shut down. Businesses closed their doors. People who could worked from home. And that meant far fewer internal combustion engine vehicles were on the roads. It led to massive reductions in air pollution and emissions and cleaner air. But as everybody got back to their regular routine, air quality worsened again. And that's because the largest contributor to carbon emissions in the U.S. is transportation, what we're driving on the roads. 76% of emissions come from fossil fuel burning engines in our cars, trains, trucks, and buses. Electric vehicles are the solution for reducing this harmful pollutant from the air and helping save the planet. Experts say electrification of trucks and cars is an essential step
toward getting to zero carbon emissions by the year 2050. It's called Net Zero. But it's going to require deep investments in solar, wind generation, battery storage, nuclear power probably, an overhaul of transmission lines. And it's got to be a situation where you, the average driver, can afford to go buy an electric vehicle. We are getting more electric vehicle charging stations in Florida with the passage of the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. So what's next? Well, there's a deep dive into this at our digital magazine, Adapt Florida, and we're going to take a closer look right now as we welcome Brendan Rivers, lead reporter at Adapt. He's on the line. Hey, Brendan, good morning.
Good morning, Melissa.
And also with us, Irella Horn-Muller, freelance journalist and correspondent for Climate Central. She collaborated on the story. Good morning to you, Irella.
Morning, Melissa.
And here's the question, folks. Would you drive an electric vehicle if you could afford one? Would you make the switch? What are your questions about the switch to EVs that we are expecting in the coming decade in this country? 549-2937. Give us a call. And emails to First Coast Connect at wjct.org. Tweets to @MelissaInJax. Okay, Brendan Rivers, let's begin with you. One of the interesting things that happened during the height of the pandemic is that air quality improved. So that was proof, if we ever needed it, that fewer fossil fuel burning engines on the roads means less emissions. Tell us what the data shows.
Well, based on the health experts we spoke to, there was a dip in reports for some of these respiratory issues that have been linked to tailpipe emissions. And I just know personally, I have asthma, and I could tell I was using my inhaler less frequently when this thing started, and people were just not on the roads. I think there were a lot of really noticeable changes in air quality, and I think there was evidence that it was beneficial to wildlife as well.
Right. So lots of positive impacts, but of course now everybody's sort of getting back to normal. So Irella, we are seeing pollutants go up. You know, according to the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, if all of the cars, trucks, and buses were immediately converted to electric today, Florida would have an extra $12.5 billion circulating through the state's economy. There is an economic benefit to going electric, but how much more leverage do lawmakers need to pursue more climate-oriented legislation like this?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. I think we definitely explore that in our story in depth. I guess my answer would be that the next legislative session is going to be really telling. We know that the Florida's Energy Office released a roadmap last year that shared the state's plans for doubling EV numbers over the next decade. But at the same time, Governor DeSantis also just signed a new law in June that blocks local officials from requiring gas stations to install EV chargers. So it is that I think if state legislators are really going to follow through on putting out some of these roadmap recommendations is a big question, and we'll see that at the next legislative session starting in January.
Let's talk about that, Brendan Rivers, because under the passage of the infrastructure bill, Florida, like all the other states, will be getting more electric vehicle charging stations. That would theoretically make it easier for people to feel comfortable about buying an electric vehicle. But still, the built environment isn't there yet in the way that it is for people who fill up with a tank of gas. So what are the biggest hurdles to making this transition?
Yeah, so that is true. I think in Jacksonville, we are actually kind of lucky. I was talking to JEA for this story, and they told me Duval has more EV charging stations per EV driver than any other county in the state. Part of that is due to a low EV adoption number. I think we're about only at 1% of drivers on the road here are driving EVs, and that's pretty consistent with the rest of the state. But I think that is not as much of an obstacle as people think it is. There are charging stations all over Jacksonville, so I think as long as you're staying around town, you're not going to have trouble finding a place. However, I do think that the biggest obstacle at this point is the price of these vehicles. They are going down, and there are a lot of incentives for buying them and for installing charging stations to help with that price tag. but it is still out of reach for a lot of people, which is why I think, and our reporting shows that the adopting electric public transportation is going to be critical to really electrifying the transportation sector.
If you're just tuning in, we're talking about the push toward electric vehicles as the nation seeks to get to zero carbon emissions by the year 2050. Give us a call. What do you drive? And would you switch to a hybrid or an electric vehicle if you thought you could afford it? The number to join us, 549-2937. Bill tweets the show, I would switch today or get a hybrid. You know, Irella, I would too. My car is paid for, so I'm in no rush to get a new one. But the next one I buy, I want it to be a hybrid or an electric vehicle. So let's talk about this because as you both report at adaptflorida.org, EVs need to dominate American auto sales by the end of this decade in 9 more years for us to successfully decarbonize this country by the year 2050 and meet the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. President Biden has called for 50% of passenger vehicle and light truck sales by the year 2030 to be zero-emission vehicles. They are releasing the newest framework of their Build Back Better plan this week to get through Congress. And it includes incentives, ways to make buying these vehicles easier for both individuals and for entities that have fleets of vehicles. Can you talk a little bit about that and the plan to make this more obtainable for Americans?
Sure. And actually, just to quickly clarify, so the Biden administration already released their Build Back Better plan, and we actually just saw earlier this week that the infrastructure bill, which is a key part of that plan, was signed into law. So that's definitely going to help the federal administration make progress towards accomplishing this plan. The measure that was just signed into law has an overall price tag of about $1 trillion, but there's about $550 billion in new public works spending that outlays $110 billion for roads, bridges, and major projects, $56 billion for passenger and freight rail, $65 billion for broadband, and this is the key number, $7.5 billion for charging stations for electric vehicles. So that act as a whole, that framework is still working through Congress. It's going to most likely include an extended EV incentive plan to reduce the cost of buying electric to make this goal a reality. But I think it's clear that the federal administration is working towards accomplishing this. And, you know, Biden's also called for 50% of passenger vehicle and light truck sales in 2030 to be zero emission vehicles. And he set part of that is setting a goal of 500,000 new charging stations nationwide by the end of the decade. So now we're just going to be seeing, now that we've seen the infrastructure bill passage is a step forward in that direction, we're going to be seeing how the federal administration and how states as well are moving towards this. In Florida, again, pointing back to that legislative session that's upcoming, that's going to be really telling because we have Florida is such an interesting use case. We have, like Brendan mentioned, only 1% of EVs are on, or 1% of vehicles on the road are EVs, and yet in Florida we don't have any EV manufacturing, but we also have we're one of the states with the highest number of registered EVs, and so there's obviously momentum and there's interest in this, and consumers are interested in getting EVs. So I think right now it's just seeing if legislation is going to support that full electrification and that full rollout, which is the intention of the federal administration. Now, if that's the intention of Florida's legislation, that's going to be that I think we'll see in the next year if that's really going to be something that will be followed through on.
As you both report at adaptflorida.org, Florida is poised to lead the EV market across the Southeast. Give us a call, everyone, as we talk about driving electric, 549-2937. Lucy on the line in Clay County. Hi, Lucy.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm great. So are you in an EV right now, I hear?
I am in an EV right now. I am driving hands-free.
Nice.
I have been driving this car for 2 years now. Absolutely love it.
What is it? What kind is it?
It's It's a Chevy Bolt with a B,
Mhm.
100% electric. It's the one that I'm sure the people have heard the battery was going to explode and catch my house on fire and all these bad things.
Yeah.
General Motors, I just got a note from them yesterday. They are going to completely replace my big battery. So now I have a 2-year-old car that's going to be a brand new car because I'm getting a brand new battery
Mhm.
for free, of course. There is zero upkeep. There are no oil changes. There are no tune-ups. The only maintenance I have to do on this vehicle is rotate the tires, which, you know, is not exactly the hardest thing in the world. As far as expense, you were talking about them being too expensive. This car, brand new, was no more expensive, actually less expensive, than all these big honking trucks I drive past every single day.
And let me ask you,
And-
were you the free battery, is that standard? The free replacement battery?
This is in the recall for, mine's a 2019, and I believe that the recall was the 2018s, 2019s, and 2020s, that there was there were like 4 cars or 6 cars in the world that the battery, when it overcharged, it's like when you leave your cell phone battery plugged in too long, and remember when the cell phones were doing that and they would catch on fire? Well, it's kind of, my understanding is it's the same kind of idea, and there were a number of, 5 or 6, statistically insignificant, but it makes good
Okay.
press.
Well, yeah.
And so they recalled all the batteries, so I get a new battery.
Nice. And Lucy, I'm so glad you're happy with your EV. It's great to hear from a driver on the roads out there right now. Thanks, Lucy. That's Lucy in Clay County. Brendan, as you report, one of the 1% of drivers in Northeast Florida behind the wheel, actually she's hands-free, of an electric vehicle.
Yeah, and I do think she gets to a really important point here. I think a lot of people just don't understand all the other benefits of going to electric vehicles. As she said, the maintenance costs are much lower. It's basically a big computer. You don't have all these bits and pieces and parts that you have to constantly get checked or replaced or repaired. You obviously don't have to pay for gas, so you get a lot of fuel savings that way. And these cars actually perform better than traditional combustion engine cars. They're faster, they accelerate faster. So I think a lot of people who are really into cars just enjoy these electric vehicles more. I went to an event that JEA put on the other day, and people were there, and it was like what you would expect at like a traditional car show. Like, people are just really excited about these vehicles and the performance aspect of them.
JEA has really been pushing electrification, although they still, of course, do depend on fossil fuels for the bulk of their energy mix. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, let's get a few more of you on the air. 549-2937. Safa in Jacksonville. Safa? Is that your name?
Good morning. It's actually Safa.
Safa.
Yes. How
Good
are you?
morning. Go ahead.
Yeah, I own 2 Teslas. I bought our first Tesla Model S in 2019 for my wife. She wouldn't let me drive it, so I had to get my own. And I own
She liked it that much, huh? Okay.
I love it, and we'll never go back to regular cars. I can tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
And the comment I want to make is that it's a misnomer that we need charging stations for daily driving. I spent $150 to put a 240 volt, 50 amp plug in my garage.
Mm-hmm.
We charge at home. For my daily driving, which is about 60 miles a day, I charge my car every third day. For daily driving, I have never been to a public charging station.
Wow, that's cool. Now, Safa, if you're going to go on a road trip somewhere, how do you do that? Tell us about that so that people understand that that's also doable.
You actually plan your trip the night before. The car automatically charges your car to the maximum amount and tells you where to stop on your way to get to additionally charge your car. So we went to North Carolina over the summertime, and we made I think 1 or 2 stops. Each stop took about 20 minutes.
Thanks, Safa. Glad you're loving it. 5492937. Lynn in Palatka. Hi, Lynn. Good morning.
Howdy. Yeah, I live in Putnam County. We have 2 fossil fuel burning power plants. What I want to know is, will the power grid handle all of this? Are they going to continue to burn fossil fuels or go to something else? Because I would love to have an electric. I drive 200 miles a day.
Sure. Thanks, Lynn. Irella, as I mentioned, fossil fuels still are driving our energy economy. Let's talk about going beyond just purchasing electric vehicles, the Biden administration's plan to rapidly decarbonize this nation.
Yeah, so I think it's a complicated question, and there's a complicated answer. I think the short answer is that electric grids just still obviously need to get much cleaner before electric vehicles are truly emissions free. And you know, we countries in general need to clean up their electric grids. The U.S. is making progress towards that, but there's a lot of pieces to it that still need to be considered. And then that's something as well within Florida that we're having, I think, a lot of focus on and a lot of legislative conversations around. I'd actually see if Brendan wanted to jump in and add anything to that answer, because I know it's pretty broad.
Yeah, Brendan.
Yeah, sure. So I know JEA, 2019, I think they only got about 1% of their energy from renewable sources, and last year was probably about the same. They are going through a process now that could see them increase their renewable energy goals, right? Which right now they're aiming to get 30% of their energy from, I think, carbon neutral sources is the language they use by the end of this decade. So that is definitely a concern, because it is still that the vast majority of the time it is fossil fuels that are powering these electric vehicles. Having said that, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't go get an electric vehicle because of that, because renewable energy is going to continue to grow in use for utilities. So eventually, if we're doing things right, your electric vehicle will be charged completely by renewable energy. So don't let that
deter you. Lots of emails and tweets. Steph in Avondale says, we have a Prius and an SUV. We'd love 2 electric cars. We hope the technology will be there for large SUVs to go electric. Americans love their big cars. We have to meet most gas-guzzling Americans where they are. Here's an email from Bart at UNF. I'm in favor of the transition to EVs, and I would buy one if I could afford it, but I'm a bike commuter, and I want to put in a word for those who like to get around under our own power on 2 wheels. Bike commuting solves a multitude of problems, he says. Here is an email from Marcia. Please have your guest discuss what happens when the battery in an EV has to be replaced, and the disposal process is that environmentally friendly. Irella.
Yeah, there's been a lot of criticism around EV batteries. I would say that broadly, we know that last year researchers in the Netherlands, they found that it's something like 95% of the world driving an EV is better for the environment than driving a gasoline-powered car. So we know that EVs sold today, they do tend to produce significantly fewer emissions than most cars fueled with gasoline. But the criticism, it centers on the raw material used to create the lithium ion cells. Those are the things that power most EVs, how much coal is being burned to charge up plug-in vehicles, and then poor recycling practices of existing batteries. And solutions to those challenges are still being explored. It goes back to the fact that countries do need to clean up their electric grids. There's a lot of conversation going into how effectively recycling and reusing these lithium batteries is a big piece of this, to make sure that emissions are minimized to the utmost. And I know there's a lot of hundreds of millions of dollars of investment that's going into recycling startups, into research centers that are trying to figure out how to disassemble dead batteries and extract valuable metals at scale. So I think again, it's a tough piece of it, but it's something that there's a lot of focus and attention being put on within the research community. And I would just stress that going back to what I said initially, we do know that EVs have a much higher positive impact in terms of producing fewer planet warming emissions. I also would love to talk about the health piece of it, because I know that's something we haven't really touched on, and that was a big part of this story that we were looking at, was how EVs, how they help reduce harmful pollutants in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you look at our story, if you look at the research that we looked at, it's not necessarily just a question of the economic benefit, which is obviously there is a lot of that, but it's how reducing air pollution on roadways is also going to save thousands of lives. We used Princeton University modeling, net zero modeling. We found that if we were to electrify most of our fleet by the end of the decade, that we would find we would actually prevent nearly 10,000 premature deaths. And I think that the health consequences of tailpipe vehicle emissions, like considering things like smog and truck pollution, a big part of the conversation and that we don't see covered a lot in reporting on EVs is how those health consequences actually affect frontline communities the most. Like, who are they affecting? And you can't really put a price on that. You can't. So the economic impact is there, but the health impact is really substantial. And we know that pollution caused by tailpipe emissions, that increases risks of like Brendan just said, he has asthma. It exacerbates existing conditions, respiratory, cardiovascular problems. In the worst case scenarios, it even can cause death. And so I'm just bringing it back to the original question. Batteries is a big part of it. There's a lot of people looking into exploring solutions there.
Sure.
But I just want to stress the health piece of that
impact.
And
sure.
Make sure. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Lots of tweets. Here's one from Jen. I just ordered a Tesla. Our gas bill is so high, it almost offsets our car payment. So excited to switch to EV. One more call. Let's go to Lisa in Atlantic Beach. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. So we are a family that has one electric vehicle, which we just love, have had it for a couple years, and one car, a Subaru, that is a gas car that is paid for, and I totally would switch to another electric vehicle as soon as possible. But here in Florida, we're in a state that has to evacuate periodically for hurricanes, and I can just imagine with all these electric vehicles, I'm concerned about all of us on the roads evacuating for a storm, and most of the cars being electric. How would we deal with that? Because it seems like that could be a problem.
Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, let's close with you, Brendan Rivers. Lots of excitement about the EV revolution, but lots of questions and concerns, such as that one.
Yeah, so I don't know that I have a good answer off the top of my head to that. That is an interesting question. I do know, especially now, most of these electric vehicles have pretty good range on a full charge, like 200 plus miles. So I guess I would say if you have an EV and there's a storm coming, make sure it's fully charged so that you can evacuate if that needs to happen. And I think if you're on a fully charged EV, I would imagine you'd be able to get inland or get to a safer place.
Yeah, and there's so much more in this piece. It's just amazing journalism. Go to adaptflorida.org and read more. Thank you, Brendan Rivers, lead reporter at our adaptflorida.org magazine. Also on the line, his collaborator, Irella Horn-Muller, a correspondent at Climate Central. Thanks to you both.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks.
And much more still ahead later. Rethreaded is getting bold new digs. We'll check it out. But up next.
We've got 2 to 8% of the workforce that's showing hesitation about vaccine mandates and whether they want to comply with that expectation. So it really has changed the workplace dynamic.
What's going on at the office? A new book looks inside The Big Quit. That's next. Well, the big quit is largely due to an epidemic of poor management, so says one author and CEO. Now, 4 million workers left their jobs in April of this year, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. 1 out of 4 say they plan to look for a new job as the pandemic sort of tapers off. And a major factor is poor management. 70% of managers have no management training or very little. In his new book, The Employee-Centric Manager, Dr. Jack Wiley says that what most employees want is a manager that helps them feel empowered. And he has other ideas about improving productivity and reducing turnover. I spoke with Wiley about the big quit. Here's that conversation. Dr. Jack Wiley, good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Melissa. Very interested in your program.
Oh, thanks. And this is a topic of interest to a lot of people. The big quit or the great resignation. 4 million workers left their jobs earlier this year. And for the first time, workers have some leverage when it comes to demanding better wages, better working conditions. Of course, if you're an employer or a manager, you're really frustrated by this. So tell us what the data shows about the big quit. What are you finding?
Right. So when we think about the big quit, you've already acknowledged that in August, 4.4 million quit their jobs. A more recent survey from that even indicated that as many as 65% of employees are considering right now departing their jobs. We also know that we've got 2 to 8% of the workforce that's showing hesitation about vaccine mandates and whether they want to comply with that expectation. So it really has changed the workplace dynamic, and as you indicated, put more power in the hands of employees. So when we think about the typical reasons why employees want to leave their current employer, over the past 20 to 25 years, those reasons have remained relatively constant. Employees, when they think about this decision, first of all, they want to be on a winning team. So do they have confidence in the future of their organization? Are they recognized and appreciated for the work that they deliver and provide? Do they sense that there's career development and a future for them in that organization? Are they doing work that jazzes them up, that matches their skills and abilities? And does the company provide for work-life balance? And I think on this last note in particular, what we're finding during the pandemic is that employees have more expectations from their organization, that they're going to step up really in 3 particular ways. First of all, by providing more support and guidance during these conditions of additional workload. Secondly, that they're going to follow safety protocols so that they're safe at work in terms of their physical well-being. And thirdly, that the companies they work for, if they can, are going to provide more flexibility in terms of allowing time off of work without repercussions, giving employees an opportunity to have a more flexible work schedule. These are the things that are increasingly important to employees as they weigh their options and are making a decision about whether they stay with their current employer or give another organization that consideration.
This all seems like common sense, particularly, after the time we've lived through, but you find that there's a disconnect between what employees actually want and what their bosses think they want. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right, Melissa. I mean, it shows up in different ways. I think, first of all, we would have to acknowledge also that on some dimensions, managers are right on target in terms of understanding what employees most want. But in a couple of areas, they've really missed the mark. One of those is in the area of support and understanding. Over 26% of employees identified that as the most important thing they wanted from their bosses, but only about 15 or 16% of managers understood that was the most important want. Even more astonishingly, 13% of all employees in the United States, from our representative sample, indicated the most important thing they wanted was to be recognized and appreciated, to be complimented for the work well done, given credit for their good ideas. But only 1% of managers understood that that was the most important want or preference or need that employees had. So that's a really significant disconnect.
Now, what about managing a hybrid workplace? Remote work is here to stay in some form. What are the biggest problems that companies have been having with that, and how can they address them?
Right. I think there are a couple of problems, and I would agree with you entirely. I think what's going to emerge as the model is going to be a hybrid model where remote work is here to stay, but there's also going to be some in-office time. I think that's going to be the most common model to emerge from this. But a couple of things that are particularly noteworthy. One is that employees are going to be dealing with, and organizations are going to be dealing with, what you might call a proximity bias. Those who are in the office are going to have more face time with the manager. Managers need to be aware that this could be a potential problem, but those employees who are physically close by are likely the first targets for managers who are seeking input from employees. And over time, these employees may emerge as the go-to trusted source for insight and perspective, and that might create an in-group, out-group between those that are physically present, those who are working remotely. Another consideration that organizations are going to have to wrestle with, frankly, is these performance monitoring systems. It's pretty nifty and technologically quite efficient to monitor the performance of your employees through these kinds of systems now that they're working remotely. And we can sort of understand the interest and need for that on the part of managers. I mean, in the past, in a typical office environment, they could walk down the hall, see how people are doing. Maybe they needed some help with this, that, or the other, but they could track progress of their employees. When employees are working remotely, they don't have that ability to just get up and walk down the hall and see how things are going. So there's a temptation to put these performance monitoring systems in place. Now, what that's going to run up against is the need that employees have for being treated with dignity and respect, to feel as if they have the flexibility to make some of these decisions on their own about how they're going to manage their time, particularly as we've seen in the pandemic, when they're also balancing issues like child care or the schooling of children or other demands that have come upon them, perhaps through fewer employees and more work per employee. They want more flexibility in how that's going to play out, and I think that's going to run up against this performance monitoring system push that many organizations are putting in place. And I think the third thing is that generally organizations to date probably haven't invested enough in training their managers and giving them the tools and thoughts and ideas about how to manage a hybrid workforce, especially with regard to completely virtual teams. This is a different skill base that has to be developed over time, and managers need help, they need assistance, they need some guidelines and some tools for how to do that. So it does create a totally different work dynamic that organizations and managers are going to have to grow into in order to be effective.
There's a lot more in your book, The Employee-Centric Manager, and it's so timely. He's Dr. Jack Wiley, organizational psychologist, CEO, and his book is out now. Thanks so much for being with us as we talk about the big quit.
Thanks, Melissa.
Northern Trust Wealth Management. Northern Trust has been helping Florida families grow their wealth for 50 years. And with 20 locations across the state, Northern Trust expertise is always close at hand.
Well, it is a new project that will benefit homeless veterans in our community. Patriot Place is going to house those homeless veterans. It's a project of Flagler Health and their Care Connect program and the St. Johns County Housing Partnership, and it's currently in the works in St. Augustine. John Eaton is Executive Director of Care Connect Plus. He's on the line. Hey, John.
Hey, good morning.
Thanks so much for being with us. And this is a great project for the First Coast, given our large veteran community. And homeless veterans in particular have so many challenges. Can you tell us how Patriot Place came about?
Sure. And thanks for having us on today. And so in 2017, Flagler Health Plus stepped into the role of lead agency for the St. Johns County Continuum of Care. And in that role, we act as a convener for other homeless providers within the community, not just to establish a vision, but also to increase the services and effectively end homelessness within our community. And since that time, we decreased veteran homelessness by 17%. But what we've seen are the barriers that veterans must face when acquiring housing. And so looking at those barriers and seeing a gap within the community, we're able to pull together providers and really create something unique with Patriot Place.
And what are some of those barriers, and how do you help homeless vets jump through all of those hoops so they can get housed?
Yeah. Well, the housing market's difficult to navigate now. Anyone who's bought a house or tried to rent in the last 2 years could see that. So navigating that, but also just the competitiveness and the prices. Renting a house, you could be paying first/security up to $4,000 to $5,000 within our community per month. And so when a veteran's identified as experiencing homelessness, we put them in within our program, and they're immediately assigned to a housing navigator. And that navigator helps them navigate different, housing search, placement, applications, and really getting all those components in line so that they can step into stable housing.
Okay, so when this opens early next year, you're going to have 6 units for at-risk veterans. They have to already be St. Johns County residents, right? They'll be getting into a one-bedroom apartment?
Yes. And really the goal is that it's more than just a home, but it's going to be a sense of community for these veterans. For the men and women that have served our community, it's the least we can do, our country. And so really looking at building camaraderie and relationships. So how do we connect them to, employment, to healthcare, to other resources they need so they can live a thriving and successful life.
And only 6 units is great, but of course so many more are needed. Can you talk a little bit about Care Connect Plus and the work that you do in St. Johns County?
Yeah, and so Care Connect Plus, we launched just shy of 4 years ago with the understanding that it's difficult to obtain resources within the communities we serve. And so since that time, we built a network of 107 today resource providers that are aligned with the network, and we try to increase coordination and access of resources. Patriot Place is a perfect example of that because it's a dynamic, community-wide really gap in service for housing. And so Patriot Place will serve as a model for us through public-private partnerships, especially with St. Johns County Housing Partnership, to do this type of work for other individuals, whether it's youth or the elderly or other individuals experiencing homelessness. So we really look forward to having this serve as a catalyst for additional housing in our community.
So talk a little bit more about that, the way to really grow this in St. Johns County, because, also people tend to think of St. Johns County as a very affluent county, but there are real needs there.
There are, yeah. We have roughly between 300 and 400 individuals who experience homelessness on any given day within our community. And so we feel strongly that we're able to tackle that need with partnerships like we have here at Patriot Place. And so through donations from whether it's the county, Morningstar Capital donated the land and $100,000 in supplies. Those kind of partnerships will be essential to really tackle the broader affordable housing needs of our community and others we serve.
So in the meantime, who will qualify to live at Patriot Place? How will you choose the first residents?
So as of today, our goal is actually to end veterans homelessness so that we reach what's called functional zero. And so today we have 17 veterans we're working with who are experiencing homelessness. So, we look forward to serving the most vulnerable from that list. And certainly we'll be housing along that timeline. But we definitely have a pipeline of individuals who are looking forward to that forever home.
Wonderful. Well, it's great to talk to you, John, and it's great to hear about Care Connect Plus, which is a social health program administered by Flagler Health. And Patriot Place will be opening in early 2022, working to house at-risk veterans in St. Johns County with the overall goal of ending veteran homelessness. Thank you so much. He's John Eaton, Executive Director of Care Connect Plus, on the line from St. John's. Have a great day and a great Thanksgiving.
Thanks, you too.
A quick break, and in a moment, they are the local nonprofit that provides jobs and training for human trafficking survivors. We will check in on some news inside Rethreaded and their new home at the Dolores Bar Weaver Campus of Hope. We'll tell you about that in just a few minutes. Keep listening. This is First Coast Connect on 89.9, and we will be right back.
Announcing Vickers Landing at Oak Bridge, bridging retirees with an all-new Ponte Vedra Beach community featuring new homes, a resort lifestyle, and a life plan for every stage of aging. Information at vickerslanding.com. Lee & Kate's Glass, family owned and operated for 95 years. Lee & Kate's Glass is your source for upgrading your home's glass, from shower doors and mirrors to windows and tabletops. Learn more at leeandkatesglass.com.
The law offices of Phillips & Hunt proudly support WJCT, personal injury, criminal defense, and family law. Phillips & Hunt, committed to justice. 904-444-4444 or floridajustice.com.
Dig into the local music scene with the Jacksonville Music Experience from WJCT Public Media. Visit jacksmusic.org for curated playlists, music reviews, music history, profiles of local artists, and more.
A performance artist in China is highlighting the country's pollution problem. He vacuumed dust and smoke out of the air to produce a brick and staged a heavy metal concert to protest, you guessed it, heavy metals. Authorities are not pleased, but he keeps coming up with new surprises. The risky art of environmental protests in China on the world.
This afternoon at 3, here on WJCT News 89.9.
This year, traffic deaths in America hit a 15-year high. And despite local programs like Vision Zero, more people are speeding and driving drunk. What's behind this surge? And what can we all do to make our roads safer? That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, they are the Jacksonville nonprofit that has won national raves for providing jobs and training for human trafficking survivors. Rethreaded helps women sew a new story, as they say. And this month they're settling into a brand new home at the Dolores Bar Weaver Campus of Hope. What is that exactly? Kristen Keene is Rethreaded's founder and CEO. She's on the line. Hey, Kristen.
Hey, Melissa.
Okay, good to talk to you. So you're having a ribbon cutting Friday and a new grand opening Saturday. Tell us about the Campus of Hope.
Oh my gosh. So we have been in 2,800 square feet for the past 10 years.
and we are limited in that building to hire 15 women. And on Saturday, we're having our grand opening of our new building that is 36,000 square feet.
Wow,
And it
that's a big
quadruples
change.
It's a big change. It quadruples our capacity to hire the number of survivors from 15 to up to 60. So it's going to make a huge impact in our community.
So how did this come about? I'm assuming thanks to a donation by the great lady herself, Dolores Barr Weaver,
Yes.
the leading philanthropist in this community.
She is amazing. She gave us that matching grant to encourage other donors, and the city stepped up and they was so generous. We found the building a month after COVID hit.
Oh.
And it has been an amazing journey. We were able to purchase it in January, and then we have been working on rehabbing the building, and we're about to open our doors to the public. So it has been quite the adventure.
So you're going to be able to hire a lot more women and make more products. Good news all around.
It's great news all around. And we are right on the border of Springfield and East Side, so we are so excited about being part of the economic development of both of those communities.
Sure. Now, the new Campus of Hope is located or will be located at 515 East 9th Street, right at the border of Springfield and the East Side. Beginning this weekend, you can come visit them. And, you know, it's great timing, Kristen, because I highly recommend Rethreaded's products as holiday gifts. These are great holiday gifts. Tell us more about the merch.
Yeah, it is we make the best holiday gifts. Everything is made by a woman who has now reclaimed her life. So you're literally shopping and changing lives. So it's a great way to put hope under your tree this year. We have everything from dog toys to journals to purses. And we recently acquired a toffee company. We acquired Amelia Toffee. So now we have the most delicious toffee in the whole world. And you can purchase that as well.
Oh, fantastic. You know, I have several of your products, and one of my favorites is this pair of earrings I bought at your old warehouse. They're beautiful. Mm-hmm. They're a combination of metal and leather, and the leather came from reclaimed seats from Southwest Airlines.
Yes.
So that's what I'm wearing on my ears when I wear one of your earrings. And that just gives you an idea of how you upcycle old materials into beautiful new products.
Yeah, that is one of our values. We have saved hundreds of thousands of pounds of material from getting into landfills, and we put it into new products. So we upcycle T-shirt and leather airline seats into new things.
And with this new warehouse, how will that ramp up your capacity to do even more interesting things now that you have more space, more employees? I'm assuming new inventory. Tell us.
Yes, first of all, we're building out an industrial kitchen on site. So we will be making the toffee on site. So, and that will eventually lead to new food products. It enables our production capacity to hire up to 30 people. And we're working on a special project that will debut eventually on billboards, taking the vinyl from billboards. So it just opens up tons of new avenues of being able to create products. I mean, it's a little overwhelming with all the possibilities because we've never had space before in our history. So space has always been our limiting factor, and now space, we have space to grow into. So it is very exciting.
Now, this new space, this is interesting. It's a former auction house and train depot?
Yes. Our building was built in 1948. We are right on the train tracks. We actually have train tracks that go in the back of our building. So we put it as part of the design. So we love the history. And then it was actually a lumber yard, and the lumber was used to build Springfield. So it has lots of history in our city. And we kept as much of the old architecture as possible in our building because we love old things made new. That's what we do. So
exactly right. How fitting.
The original building.
So
yes.
the ribbon cutting Friday, and then beginning Saturday, you have the grand opening, and the public is invited. How can they come out?
Please come. It's going to be from 6 to 9. You can sign up on our Facebook event or on our website. There's going to be beer from 3 different breweries, food by Prata Italy, Italia. There's going to be music, and there's just going to be a flood of hope. We're just hoping to flood Jacksonville once again with like hope that the impossible can be made possible.
Check it out, everybody, at the new grand opening of the new rethreaded Dolores Bar Weaver Campus of Hope. It's at 515 East 9th Street. Come on out Saturday evening, the 20th, starting at 6 p.m. and check out this dynamic new space and pick up some great products for everyone on your list this holiday. Kristen Keene, I'll see you there. It's in my neighborhood. It's in my neighborhood after all. So.
Oh, great. Okay. Then
All
I'll
right.
See you there.
See you there. And have a great day, everyone. We'll be back at 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.